What if a single act of kindness could change not just one life, but many? What if stopping to help a stranger on the side of the road could set off a chain of events so profound it would transform an entire community? This is the story of Peter, struggling single father, and Sylvia, a young CEO with a compassionate heart. Their unexpected meeting sparks a journey of hope, resilience, and the undeniable power of human connection. Through moments of doubt, triumph, and discovery, their story will take you on an emotional ride you won't want to miss. How does a chance encounter with a flat tire lead to the creation of something extraordinary? And how does kindness, in its simplest form, ripple out to touch so many lives? Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more inspiring stories like this one. Let's begin The Ripple of Kindness, a tale that might just inspire you to start your own ripple today. A struggling single dad helped a woman change her tire. She turned out to be a billionaire. The soft hum of the alarm clock barely registered in Peter's mind as he jolted awake, his body aching from another night spent on the worn-out couch. It wasn't the ideal place to sleep, but the small two-bedroom apartment left him little choice. Max, his 6-year-old son, had outgrown the twin bed he shared with his 4-year-old sister Lily. To make sure they had a comfortable space, Peter willingly gave up his room. His sacrifice wasn't uncommon. Peter had built his life around ensuring his children were taken care of, even if it meant living on scraps of his own time and comfort. The scent of burnt toast drifted through the apartment as Peter hurriedly fixed breakfast. With one eye on the toaster and the other on the clock, he muttered under his breath, "Come on, come on." The school bus would be arriving in 20 minutes, and he still needed to pack lunches. Max shuffled into the kitchen, his tousled hair a wild mess. "Dad, why is the toast black again?" he asked, his tone laced with innocent curiosity. Peter forced a smile, ruffling his son's hair. "It's gourmet toast, buddy. Extra crispy, just the way you like it." Max wrinkled his nose but didn't protest. Lily followed close behind, dragging her favorite stuffed bunny along the floor. "Daddy, can I have pancakes?" she asked, sweetly climbing onto her chair. Peter crouched down to her level, his smile faltering for a brief moment. "Not today, sweetheart. We're having a toast adventure." The truth was, Peter couldn't afford to waste time or groceries. His paycheck from working as a delivery driver barely covered rent, utilities, and groceries. Extras like pancakes were a luxury. As he ushered the kids out the door, Peter caught a glimpse of an unopened envelope on the counter. The bold lettering from his landlord sent a shiver down his spine. He didn't need to open it to know what it said. Another rent increase was coming. The drive to work was uneventful, but Peter's mind was anything but calm. His job as a delivery driver for a local supply company paid just enough to scrape by, but it demanded long hours. Any slight delay, like getting the kids ready or dealing with a tantrum, meant risking another reprimand. Today was no different. As he walked into the office, his supervisor, Mr. Sanders, was waiting, clipboard in hand and a sour look on his face. "Peter, late again?" Sanders barked, not even looking up from his notes. "You know we can't keep doing this. You're a good worker, but I need reliability." "I know, I'm sorry," Peter said quickly, trying to keep his tone even. "It won't happen again." "Yeah, well, it better not. We're stretched, as thin as it is." With a dismissive wave, Sanders walked off, leaving Peter standing there, his heart sinking further into his chest. Peter grabbed his clipboard and headed out to the loading dock. The grind of the day took over, and for a few hours he managed to push his worries aside. But the weight of everything always found its way back. As he loaded boxes into his truck, his thoughts drifted to the promise he had made to himself after his wife's accident, to be the father his kids deserved, no matter the cost. Yet there were moments like this, moments when he felt like he was failing them. That evening, Peter walked into the apartment, greeted by laughter and the faint sound of cartoons playing on the TV. Max and Lily were sprawled on the floor, coloring pictures. "Daddy!" Lily exclaimed, running to wrap her tiny arms around his leg. Max looked up, his eyes lighting up as he held up a drawing. "Look, Dad, it's you, me, and Lily. I drew us at the park." Peter knelt beside him, studying the crayon. Drawing. In it, he was depicted as a giant towering over Max and Lily. They were all smiling, holding hands, his throat tightened. To them, he was still a hero, even if he felt like anything but. After dinner, a simple meal of spaghetti, Peter tucked Lily into her bed, making sure her stuffed bunny was nestled beside her. "Good night, Daddy," she murmured, her eyes already drifting shut. Max, still awake, sat cross-legged on his bed. "Dad, are we gonna be okay?" he asked suddenly, his voice quiet but filled with worry beyond his years. Peter froze for a moment, caught off guard by the question. He sat beside Max, pulling him into a gentle hug. "Of course we are, buddy. Things might be tough right now, but we're a team, and teams stick together no matter what." As the apartment fell silent and the kids drifted off to sleep, Peter sat alone on the couch, the unopened envelope still on the counter. He stared at it, the weight of its implications pressing down on him. Finally, he stood and walked over, holding the envelope in his hands. But instead of opening it, he set it back down and turned away. Walking back to the couch, he whispered to himself, "No matter what happens, I'll figure it out. I'll take care of them." The golden glow of the setting sun bathed the park in a soft, warm light as Peter drove home from another grueling day at work. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his mind racing through the usual loop of worries. The unopened envelope. On the counter, Max's upcoming school field trip, and how he could stretch his dwindling paycheck to cover the rising costs. He rubbed his temples, trying to suppress the nagging voice that whispered he wasn't doing enough. As he turned down a quiet street by the park, a figure on the roadside caught his eye. A sleek black sedan was parked awkwardly, its rear tire visibly flat. Standing beside it was a woman dressed in a tailored blazer and pencil skirt, her arms crossed as she stared at the tire with a mix of frustration and helplessness. Peter hesitated, his exhaustion urging him to keep driving. But then he glanced at her again, catching the subtle slump of her shoulders, and instinctively slowed to a stop. Pulling over, Peter stepped out of his car and approached her cautiously. "Looks like you've got a flat," he said, his voice friendly but weary. The woman turned toward him, her striking features momentarily softened by relief. She appeared young, perhaps in her early 30s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that hinted at a keen awareness of the world around her. "Yes, she began, then paused, as though deciding whether to trust him. "I noticed it about half a mile back. I was hoping I could make it home, but—" She gestured helplessly. At the deflated tire, Peter glanced at her hands, noticing the faint streaks of grease on her fingers. She'd clearly tried to fix it herself, but hadn't gotten far. "You've got a spare?" he asked. "In the trunk, I think," she replied, her tone uncertain. "I've never had to use it before." Peter nodded, setting his lunch bag on. "The ground. Let me take a look." He retrieved the spare tire and jack, quickly assessing the situation. The woman stepped back, watching him work with a mix of gratitude and curiosity. "Thank you for stopping," she said after a moment. "I wasn't sure anyone would." Peter shrugged, keeping his focus on loosening the lug nuts. "It's no problem. These things always seem to happen at the worst time, huh?" She laughed softly, the sound more genuine than Peter expected. "That's putting it mildly. I've had back-to-back meetings all day, and this was not on the schedule." Peter glanced up briefly. "Busy day, huh?" "You could say that," she replied, then hesitated. "I run a non-profit. We're trying to finalize plans for a new project, and it's been hectic." Peter didn't press further. He could tell she was the type of person who was used to solving problems on her own. Instead, he focused on finishing the task, tightening the bolts on the spare tire. After a few minutes, he stood, brushing his hands on his worn jeans. "There, you should be good to go now," he said, stepping back to admire his work. The woman offered a warm smile. "Thank you so much. I don't even know how to repay you." Peter shook his head. "No need. Helping someone shouldn't come with a price tag." Her smile faltered slightly, replaced by a thoughtful expression. "That's rare," she said, softly. "Most people don't stop these days, let alone refuse payment." Peter shrugged again, feeling slightly uncomfortable under her scrutiny. "It's just the right thing to do." The woman tilted her head, studying him as though trying to piece together a puzzle. "What's your name?" she asked. "Peter," he replied simply. "Well, Peter, I'm Sylvia," she said, extending her hand. "I really do appreciate this. You didn't have to stop, especially after what I'm guessing was a long day." Peter shook her hand, feeling the firmness of her grip. It was a handshake that spoke of confidence and authority, yet her tone remained warm and genuine. "It's no big deal," he said. Sylvia hesitated for a moment, then reached into her bag, pulling out a sleek business card. "Here," she said, handing it to him. "If you ever need anything, or if you're just curious about the work we do, call me." Peter accepted the card, glancing at the embossed logo and her title. Sylvia Thompson, CEO, Bright Futures, Foundation. He looked back at her, feeling a flicker of something he couldn't quite name. Hope, maybe. Or perhaps it was just curiosity. "Thanks," he said, slipping the card into his pocket. Sylvia smiled again, her expression thoughtful. "I meant what I said, Peter. People like you, kind, selfless, can change lives in ways you might not even realize." With that, she climbed back into her car. Peter watched as the sleek sedan disappeared down the street, her words lingering in his mind. He didn't know what she saw in him, but for the first time in a long while, he felt noticed, like maybe he wasn't invisible after all. The following evening, Peter was sorting through the day's mail, his mind preoccupied with bills and Max's growing list of school expenses, when his phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at the unfamiliar number and hesitated. Unknown calls usually meant collection agencies or telemarketers, neither of which he had the energy to deal with. Still, something compelled him to pick up. "Hello?" Peter said cautiously. "Peter, this is Sylvia Thompson," came the warm, professional voice on the other end. "We met yesterday at the park." Peter straightened instinctively. "Oh, yes, Sylvia, how are you?" "I'm doing well, thanks to you," she said, a hint of humor in her tone. "I wanted to call and thank you again for helping me out. Honestly, you saved my day." "Really, it was nothing," Peter said, feeling a little awkward under her gratitude. "I'm glad I could help." "Well, it wasn't nothing to me," Sylvia replied firmly. "And actually, that's why I'm calling. I'd like to invite you to an event my organization is hosting this weekend. It's a gathering for single parents and families we've supported through our programs. We'll share stories, connect with each other, and talk about the work we're doing." Peter froze. An event? He could almost picture it now. A room filled with polished, confident people, dressed in business casual, sipping wine and talking about successes he couldn't imagine. "I'm not sure I'd fit in at something like that," he said, his voice hesitant. Sylvia's voice softened. "Peter, this isn't about fitting in. It's about connection. From what little you shared with me yesterday, I can tell you've got a story worth hearing, and I think you might find some inspiration too." Peter glanced toward the living room, where Max and Lily were sprawled on the floor coloring. Max was furiously erasing a mistake, while Lily hummed to herself, oblivious to her brother's frustration. "I don't know," Peter said, more to himself than to Sylvia. Sensing his hesitation, Sylvia added, "You don't need to bring anything or prepare anything. Just come as you are. Bring your kids if you'd like. It's a family-friendly event." The mention of his kids caught Peter's attention. "I'll think about it," he said finally. "Fair enough," Sylvia replied. "The details are in the email I just sent you. No pressure, Peter, but I'd love to see you there." After they hung up, Peter stared at his phone for a long moment. He hadn't even realized she had his email. But sure enough, there it was. An invitation to an event hosted by Bright Futures Foundation. The details were simple. Saturday afternoon at a community center downtown, casual attire. Later that night, after Max and Lily were asleep, Peter sat on the couch, phone in hand, rereading the email. His initial instinct was to decline. He didn't belong at events like this. What could he possibly contribute? He wasn't a polished speaker or a success story. He was just a guy trying to keep his kids fed and the roof over their heads. But as he mulled it over, another thought crept in. Maybe this was an opportunity, not for him, but for Max and Lily. If this foundation helped families like his, maybe they could benefit in ways he couldn't yet see. Maybe Sylvia had a point. His story might not feel special to him. But what if it could help someone else? The next morning, as Peter poured cereal for breakfast, he broached the subject with Max. "Hey, bud, what do you think about going to an event this weekend? It's for families like ours." Max looked up from his bowl, milk dribbling down his chin. "Like ours? What do you mean?" "Well, it's for single parents and kids," Peter said. "A chance to meet other families who've been through tough times." Max considered this, his young face thoughtful. "Will there be other kids to play with?" "I think so," Peter said, smiling. "And maybe there'll be snacks too." Max grinned. "Okay, I'm in. Can Lily come?" "Of course," Peter said, glancing over at Lily, who was busy making her stuffed bunny hop across the table. The days leading up to the event were a mix of nerves and anticipation. Peter debated backing out more than once, but every time he looked at Max and Lily, he reminded himself why he needed to go. On Saturday afternoon, he dressed them in their best clothes, clean but casual, and even managed to iron his own shirt. As they drove to the community center, Peter felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his chest. What if it was a mistake? What if he felt out of place, judged, or worse, invisible? When they arrived, the parking lot was bustling with families. Peter helped Lily out of her car seat, holding her hand tightly as they approached the entrance. Max skipped ahead, his energy contagious. Peter took a deep breath and stepped inside, hoping he'd made the right choice. The community center buzzed with chatter and laughter as families filled the large, brightly lit room. Peter hesitated at the entrance, holding Lily's hand while Max tugged impatiently at his sleeve. "Dad, come on! There's balloons!" Max pointed excitedly toward the cluster of colorful decorations near a makeshift stage. Peter swallowed hard, his nerves getting the better of him. He felt underdressed in his neatly pressed but old button-down shirt and scuffed shoes, surrounded by people who looked like they had just stepped out of a magazine. Women in smart blouses and men in tailored jackets mingled comfortably, their confidence on full display. He started to wonder if coming here was a mistake. Before he could turn around and retreat, Sylvia appeared, weaving through the crowd with her characteristic poise. She wore a deep green dress that complemented her striking features, but her welcoming smile made her seem more approachable than polished. "Peter!" she called, waving him over. Her eyes softened when she saw Max and Lily. "And you brought your little ones. I'm so glad you could make it." Peter nodded awkwardly. "Thanks for inviting us. I wasn't sure if this was really my kind of thing." Sylvia's smile widened. "It's exactly your kind of thing. Come on, let me introduce you to some people." Sylvia guided Peter through the room, pausing to greet other families and volunteers. Each introduction felt daunting to Peter at first, but the warmth of the attendees slowly chipped away at his discomfort. One woman, a single mother of 3, shared her story about juggling multiple jobs and still making time to attend night school. Another man spoke of how Sylvia's foundation had helped him secure affordable housing after losing his job. Peter listened intently, nodding as each person spoke. Their stories mirrored his own struggles in ways he hadn't expected. He began to feel less like an outsider and more like part of a community that understood the weight he carried. "See?" Sylvia said as they moved to a quieter corner. "You're not alone in this, Peter. That's what tonight is about, connecting with people who've been where you are." Peter glanced at Max and Lily, who were now happily playing with a group of children near the snack table. "It's nice," he admitted, "hearing their stories. It helps." Sylvia's expression softened. "And your story could help someone, too." Peter tensed. "I don't know about that. I'm not exactly the inspirational type." Sylvia tilted her head, studying him. "You'd be surprised. People don't need perfection, Peter. They need honesty. Why don't you share a little? You don't have to prepare a speech, just speak from the heart." As the evening progressed, the attendees gathered near the stage for the event's main program. Sylvia stepped up to the microphone, her confident voice carrying through the room as she welcomed everyone and shared the Foundation's mission. She spoke of the importance of building a support network for single parents and empowering families to overcome challenges together. "Tonight," she said, her gaze sweeping the audience, "I want to highlight the strength and resilience of the people who inspire us to keep going. Peter," she added, her eyes locking onto his, "would you mind sharing a bit of your story?" The room turned toward him and Peter froze. For a moment he considered refusing, but then he saw Max watching him with wide, curious eyes. Taking a deep breath, he stood and made his way to the front, his hands trembling slightly. "Hi," Peter began, his voice shaky. He cleared his throat, forcing himself to continue. "I'm Peter and, I didn't really plan on speaking tonight. Honestly, I wasn't even sure I belonged here." A few people chuckled softly, encouraging him to go on. Peter glanced down at his hands before looking back up. "I'm a single dad. My wife passed away 2 years ago, and since then, it's just been me and my 2 kids. Some days, I feel like I'm doing okay, and other days—" He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "Other days, I feel like I'm barely holding it together." The room was silent, the weight of his words settling over the audience. "But I wake up every day, and I try. I try because Max and Lily deserve that. They deserve a dad who doesn't give up, even when it feels impossible." When Peter finished, the room erupted in applause. He felt his face flush, but he couldn't help the small smile that tugged at his lips. Sylvia was clapping the loudest, her expression one of quiet pride. Afterward, people came up to thank Peter for sharing. A young father told him how much his words resonated, while an older woman praised his courage. Peter didn't know how to respond, overwhelmed by the kindness and support. Sylvia joined him, a satisfied look on her face. "I told you, Peter. Honesty is what people connect with." Peter shook his head, still reeling. "I didn't think anyone would care." "They care," Sylvia said firmly, "and now you see why I think you have so much potential. This is just the beginning." As the event wound down, Peter gathered Max and Lily, who were reluctantly leaving their new friends. On the drive home, he felt lighter than he had in months. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel invisible. He didn't feel like just another struggling father trying to survive. He felt hopeful, and as he tucked Max and Lily into bed that night, he couldn't help but wonder if Sylvia was right. Maybe his story could make a difference, not just for himself, but for others too. The morning sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Sylvia's downtown office, casting long shadows across the sleek, minimalist furniture. She sat at her desk, staring at her laptop, the faint sound of bustling traffic below, barely registering in her mind. A spreadsheet filled with donor statistics glared back at her, but her thoughts were miles away. Her office was the epitome of success. Framed accolades lined the walls, and a plaque engraved with "Bright Futures." Foundation Sylvia Thompson, CEO, sat prominently on her desk, yet the weight of her responsibilities felt heavier than usual today. She closed the laptop with a sigh and leaned back in her chair, gazing at the photo on the corner of her desk. A faded picture of a woman with kind eyes and a weary smile, holding a little girl in her arms. Sylvia picked up the photo, running, her fingers over the frame. "Hey, Mom," she murmured softly. "Still trying to make you proud." Sylvia's childhood had been anything but glamorous. She grew up in a cramped apartment in the heart of a struggling neighborhood, where every dollar stretched until it broke. Her mother, Carla, worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. Despite the hardships, Carla never let Sylvia feel unloved. She taught Sylvia the value of hard work, perseverance, and most importantly, kindness. Sylvia still remembered the night her mother came home exhausted after a double shift, her uniform stained and her hands trembling from fatigue. Yet when their neighbor, a single father with 2 kids, knocked on their door asking for help, Carla didn't hesitate. She gave him the last of their food for the week without a second thought. "We'll manage," Carla had said, smiling at Sylvia. "Kindness always comes back around." Those words had stuck with Sylvia, shaping her into the woman she was. Today, when her mother passed away just as Sylvia was starting college, she vowed to honor Carla's legacy by dedicating her life to helping families like theirs. The Bright Futures Foundation was born from that promise, growing from a small community program into a nationally recognized nonprofit. But success came with a cost. As the foundation expanded, Sylvia found herself pulled further from the communities. She wanted to serve. Board meetings, corporate partnerships, and endless fundraising events consumed her days. Her image as the confident, composed CEO often felt like a mask, one that kept her at arm's length from the people who mattered most. Her recent encounter with Peter had stirred something in her. His quiet resilience reminded her so much of her mother that it was almost unsettling. She saw in him the same unyielding dedication to his children, the same refusal to let circumstances define him. It was why she had been so adamant about inviting him to the event. Watching him share his story had reaffirmed something she had started to lose sight of: the power of authenticity. Sylvia's phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a reminder for her upcoming meeting with the board of directors. She grabbed her notepad and headed to the conference room, bracing herself for the inevitable discussions about budgets and growth strategies. The meeting was as predictable as ever. The board members, dressed in suits that likely cost more than most families earned in a month, praised the foundation's recent milestones while emphasizing the importance of maintaining their donor base. "We need to prioritize high-profile initiatives," one member said, his voice dripping with authority. "Expanding our corporate sponsorships is crucial if we want to sustain growth." "I agree," another chimed in. "We should focus on large-scale projects that show measurable impact. Personal outreach is great, but it's not scalable." Sylvia forced a polite smile, though her frustration simmered beneath the surface. "While I understand the need for scalability," she said, choosing her words carefully, "we can't lose sight of the individual families we're trying to help. Stories like Peter's, those are what make our work meaningful. They remind people that we're not just a faceless organization." A few board members exchanged skeptical glances. "That's admirable, Sylvia, but we need to think strategically. You're the face of this foundation. Your time is better spent securing major partnerships than working on the ground." The words stung more than Sylvia expected. She nodded professionally, but as the meeting dragged on, her mind wandered. Was she really helping anyone by sitting in these rooms, debating strategies and polishing PR campaigns? Or was she becoming exactly what she had promised herself? She wouldn't a figurehead disconnected from the people she wanted to uplift. After the meeting, Sylvia retreated to her office, feeling drained. She thought of Peter again, of his raw honesty and the way he had captured the room with his story. She thought of Max and Lily, their innocence and the hope in their eyes. That was the heart of her work, the real human connections that no amount of funding or corporate jargon could replace. Sylvia picked up her phone and dialed a number. When Peter answered, she smiled, her voice lighter than it had been all day. "Peter, it's Sylvia. I was wondering, would you have time to meet for coffee this week? I'd like to talk more about your story and how we can work together to inspire others." Peter hesitated, clearly surprised. Sure. I guess I can make that work." "Great," Sylvia said, her tone filled with genuine enthusiasm. "I think we can do something really meaningful here, Peter. I'll send you the details." As she hung up, Sylvia felt a flicker of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe working more closely with people like Peter was the answer. Maybe reconnecting with the ground-level work her mother had always believed in was the key to bringing her vision back to life. The soft murmur of voices filled the room as Peter stood near the entrance of the community hall, clutching a stack of pamphlets in one hand. Max and Lily were by his side, each holding a basket of colourful bracelets that Sylvia's foundation handed out at events. It was Peter's third time participating as a community ambassador, and while he still felt out of place at times, the warm smiles and heartfelt conversations he'd encountered were beginning to ease his discomfort. "Daddy, can I give this to that lady?" Lily asked, pointing at a woman seated alone in a corner. She had a toddler balanced on her hip and a tired expression that Peter recognized all too well. "Of course, sweetheart," Peter said, crouching to Lily's level. "Why don't you tell her it's a gift and ask if she'd like to join us?" "Over here." Lily nodded enthusiastically and skipped off, her stuffed bunny trailing behind her. Max tugged at Peter's sleeve. "Dad, do you think they'll let me help at the snack table? They've got cookies." Peter chuckled, ruffling Max's hair. "Go ahead, but remember to ask first, okay?" As Max darted off, Peter straightened and scanned the room. Families were scattered throughout the hall, talking, laughing, and sharing their stories. It reminded him of his first event and how unsure he'd felt about being there. Now, he was beginning to see the power of these gatherings, the connections they built, the encouragement they provided. He had never imagined that his story could mean something to others, but every time someone thanked him for sharing, he felt a little more confident. Sylvia approached, her usual composed demeanor softened by the warm atmosphere. "You're doing great, Peter," she said, handing him a cup of coffee. "The families really appreciate having someone like you here." Peter took the cup, nodding. "Thanks. I guess it's easier now that I've done this a few times." Sylvia's smile widened. "That's the beauty of it. People see themselves in you, your struggles, your resilience. It gives them hope." As they spoke, a man in his early 40s stepped forward, his expression hesitant but friendly. "Excuse me," he said, addressing Peter. "You're the one who spoke at the last event, right? About raising your kids on your own?" Peter nodded, his stomach tightening slightly. "Yeah, that's me." "I just wanted to say thank you," the man continued. "Hearing your story, it made me feel less alone. I've got 2 kids too, and it's been hard since my wife left. But seeing someone else doing it, it gives me hope that I can manage too." Peter's throat tightened as he extended his hand. "Thank you. That means a lot." The man smiled, shaking his hand firmly. "You're an inspiration, whether you realize it or not." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of conversations and shared laughter. Max and Lily had quickly made friends, darting between the tables with their usual energy. As Peter packed up at the end of the event, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. For the first time in years, he felt like he was part of something bigger, something meaningful. But not everyone shared that sentiment. Brian stood near the back of the hall, arms crossed, as he watched Peter interact with the families. He had been with the foundation for nearly a decade, dedicating countless hours to organizing events and securing sponsorships. Yet in the span of a few months, Peter had become the face everyone seemed to gravitate toward. It grated on him. As Sylvia walked past, Brian stepped into her path. "Sylvia, can I have a word?" "Of course, Brian," Sylvia said, her tone polite but guarded. She could sense the tension in his posture. Brian gestured toward Peter. "I don't mean to be out of line, but don't you think you're putting a lot of trust in someone we barely know? Peter's a nice guy, sure, but he's not exactly qualified to represent the foundation." Sylvia's eyes narrowed slightly. "What are you getting at, Brian?" "I'm just saying we should be careful," Brian replied, lowering his voice. "He's getting a lot of attention, and people are starting to talk. They're wondering if you're playing favorites." Sylvia's expression hardened. "Peter is here because his story matters, and because he's making a difference. If people have concerns, they're welcome to come to me directly." Brian raised his hands in mock surrender. "Of course. I just thought you should know what people are saying." Sylvia didn't respond, her gaze steady and unwavering. Brian walked away, leaving her standing there with a tight knot of frustration. In her chest, Peter noticed Sylvia's tension as she approached him later. "Everything okay?" he asked. She forced a smile, nodding. "Just the usual challenges of running an organization." Peter tilted his head, sensing there was more to it, but he decided not to press. Instead, he said, "Thanks for letting me be part of this. It feels good, you know?" "It should," Sylvia replied, her voice firm with conviction. "You're exactly what this foundation needs. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." Peter frowned slightly but nodded. "I'll try." That night, as Peter tucked Max and Lily into bed, he replayed Sylvia's words in his mind. He wanted to believe them, but the doubt lingered. He could feel the weight of the expectations placed on him, and he wasn't sure he could live up to them. Meanwhile, Brian sat at his desk, drafting an email to the board. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he considered his next move. If Sylvia wouldn't listen to reason, maybe the board would. He wasn't going to let an outsider overshadow his years of work without a fight. Peter sat at the kitchen table, flipping through his schedule for the week. The foundation's big community outreach event was tomorrow, and Sylvia had asked him to share his story once again. It was the largest audience yet, including several potential donors whose support could shape the foundation's future projects. Peter knew it was an opportunity he couldn't miss, but as he glanced at the stack of unfinished homework Max had left on the table and the pile of laundry waiting to be folded, a familiar pang of guilt crept into his chest. "Daddy, can you read this book to me?" Lily's voice broke through his thoughts. She stood in the doorway clutching her favorite storybook, her stuffed bunny tucked under her arm. Peter smiled, setting the papers aside. "Of course, sweetheart. Hop on up." Lily clambered onto his lap. Max appeared in the doorway, his arms crossed. "Are you going to be gone again tomorrow?" he asked, his tone sharp for a 6-year-old. Peter hesitated. "Just for the afternoon, buddy. I'll be back before dinner." Max frowned. "You said that last time, and you didn't come back. Until bedtime." "I know," Peter said gently, pulling Max closer, "but this is really important, and it's going to help a lot of people." Max shrugged out of Peter's grasp. "You're always busy. You don't care about us anymore." He stormed off to his room, leaving Peter stunned. Lily tilted her head up at him, her big eyes filled with curiosity. "Why is Max mad?" Peter sighed, kissing her forehead. "He's just tired, sweetheart. Let's read your book." The next morning, Peter woke to the sound of coughing from Lily's room. When he opened the door, he found her sitting on her bed, her cheeks flushed and her breathing labored. "Daddy, my throat hurts," she whispered. Peter's heart sank. He pressed a hand to her forehead and felt the telltale heat of a fever. Okay, baby, let's get you some medicine. By mid-morning, Lily's fever had climbed higher, and Peter found himself pacing the living room with her cradled in his arms. The event was only hours away, and Sylvia was counting on him. He glanced at the clock, his mind racing. He could call a neighbor to watch Lily for a few hours, but the thought of leaving her when she was so sick made his stomach churn. "Daddy, I don't feel good," Lily murmured, her voice small and weak. Peter kissed her temple. "I know, sweetheart. I'm here." At that moment, he knew there was no decision to be made. Lily came first, always. The community center buzzed with activity as attendees arrived for the event. Sylvia stood near the stage, scanning the room for Peter. She glanced at her watch, her brow furrowing. He was late, and the program was about to start. Brian approached her, a smug look on his face. "Looks like your star speaker isn't showing up." Sylvia shot him a warning glance. "I'm sure he has a good reason." Brian shrugged. "You might want to consider someone more reliable next time." Ignoring him, Sylvia pulled out her phone and sent Peter a quick text. "Hey, are you on your way?" At home, Peter sat on the couch with Lily nestled against him, her fever finally beginning to subside. His phone buzzed on the coffee table, but he didn't move to pick it up. Max sat on the other end of the couch, his arms crossed and his gaze fixed on the floor. "Max," Peter began, his voice tentative, "I'm sorry I've been so busy lately. I know it's been hard." Max didn't respond at first, but then he looked up, his eyes brimming with tears. "I just miss you, Dad. You're always gone, and it feels like you care more about those people than us." Peter's chest tightened. He reached out, pulling Max into a hug. "I'm so sorry, buddy. I love you and Lily more than anything. I'll do better, I promise." Max sniffled, but didn't pull away. "Okay." Later that evening, as the sun began to set, Peter heard a knock at the door. He opened it to find Sylvia standing on the porch, a soft smile on her face. "Hey," she said, "can I come in?" Peter nodded, stepping aside. "Of course." Sylvia entered the small living room, her gaze falling on Lily, who was curled up on the couch with Max beside her. "How's she doing?" Sylvia asked. "She's better," Peter said, his voice weary. "It's been a long day." Sylvia sat down in the armchair across from him, her expression thoughtful. "You didn't make it to the event," she said gently. Peter nodded. "I couldn't leave her, Sylvia. She needed me." "I understand," Sylvia said, her tone sincere. "That's what makes you the kind of person this foundation needs, because you care. About your kids, about others, but I also see how much you're carrying, and it's not sustainable." Peter sighed, leaning forward. "I don't know if I can do it all, Sylvia. Be a good dad, do my job, and help the foundation. Something's going to give." Sylvia leaned in, her voice firm but compassionate. "You're not alone, Peter. We'll figure it out together. The work you're doing matters, but so does your family. Let me help you find that balance." Peter met her gaze, a flicker of hope breaking through his exhaustion. "Thanks, Sylvia. That means a lot." The low hum of conversation filled the Bright Futures Foundation office as Sylvia walked into the boardroom, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. The expressions on the faces of the board members were grim, their usual air of camaraderie replaced by tension. At the head of the table sat Brian, his arms crossed and a self-satisfied smirk tugging at his lips. Sylvia took her seat at the table, folding her hands calmly in front of her. "Thank you all for meeting on short notice," she began, her voice steady. "I understand there have been concerns raised about Peter's role in the foundation." A senior board member cleared his throat. "Sylvia, we've received reports that Peter may not be the ideal representative for the foundation. There are claims that he's leveraging his position for personal gain, and frankly, questions about his financial stability." Sylvia's eyes flicked toward Brian, who feigned indifference but couldn't hide the glint of triumph in his gaze. What specific claims are we talking about? Sylvia asked, her tone sharp. Peter has been transparent about his background, and his story is central to the work we do. What's changed? Brian leaned forward, his voice measured but dripping with feigned concern. It's not just about his background, there's a perception issue. People are starting to wonder if his struggles undermine the foundation's image, and let's not ignore the talk about how close you've become with him. It raises questions, Sylvia. The insinuation hit like a slap, but Sylvia didn't flinch. Instead, she fixed Brian with a cold stare. Are you suggesting that Peter's honesty about his struggles makes him less qualified to represent the very people we're trying to help? Brian shrugged, his tone turning patronizing. I'm just saying we need to be careful. Perception matters. If donors start thinking we're prioritizing personal connections over professionalism, it could hurt our credibility. Peter stood in his small kitchen, staring blankly at the envelope in his hands. It wasn't the usual stack of bills or rent notices. It was a formal letter from the Foundation's board. His role as an ambassador was being temporarily suspended while they conducted an internal review. The words blurred together as a wave of humiliation washed over him. He had known people like Brian would question his place at the Foundation, but seeing it in writing made it real. He could feel the weight of judgment, the whispering doubts he'd tried so hard to ignore now shouting in his mind. "Dad!" Max's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Peter quickly slipped the letter into a drawer and forced a smile. "What's up, buddy?" Max held up his math homework. "Can you help me with this? It's hard." Peter knelt beside him at the table, his heart aching as he tried to focus on the equations. He couldn't let his kids see how much this was affecting him. They needed him to be steady even when he felt like crumbling. Sylvia arrived at Peter's apartment that evening, her face set with determination. Peter opened the door, surprised to see her standing there with a bag of takeout and an unshakable look of resolve. "Mind if I come in?" she asked, stepping inside without waiting for a response. Peter shut the door, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, Sylvia, I know you're trying to help, but maybe Brian's right. Maybe I don't belong in this role." Sylvia set the takeout on the counter and turned to face him. "Peter, stop. You belong there more than anyone. Do you know why people connect with you? Because you're real. You don't hide your struggles, and that gives people hope. Donors don't want polished perfection. They want authenticity. That's what you bring." Peter shook his head. "Yeah, but it's not just about me. You've worked so hard to build this foundation. I don't want to be the reason people start questioning you." Sylvia's expression softened, and she placed a hand on his arm. "Peter, I know what it feels like to be doubted. When I started this foundation, no one took me seriously. They said I was too young, too ambitious, too naive, but I kept going because I knew the work mattered, and I see that same determination in you. Don't let people like Brian make you doubt yourself." Peter looked at her, her words sinking in slowly. "I don't know if I can handle standing up to them." Sylvia smiled gently. "You can, and you're not alone in this. I'll stand with you." The following weekend, the Foundation hosted a community meeting at a local hall, bringing together families, staff, and board members. Sylvia had suggested that Peter use the opportunity to address the rumors and speak his truth, directly to the people who mattered most. As Peter stood backstage, he could feel his hands trembling. Max and Lily were seated in the front row, their faces full of encouragement. Sylvia stood beside him, a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You've got this," she said. "Just speak from the heart." When Peter stepped onto the stage, the murmur of the crowd quieted. He took a deep breath, gripping the microphone tightly. "Hi, everyone! My name is Peter, and I want to thank you all for giving me the chance to speak today." He paused, scanning the room. "I know there have been questions about me, about my place in this foundation and whether I deserve to be here. I won't lie, I've struggled. My life hasn't been easy. But those struggles are why I'm here." Peter's voice grew stronger as he continued. "This foundation isn't about pretending everything is perfect. It's about helping people who are facing real challenges. It's about showing families like mine that they're not alone. If my story makes even one person feel less isolated, then I think I've done something worthwhile." The room erupted into applause. Sylvia beamed from the sidelines, while Brian sat in the back, his arms crossed and his face unreadable. The community hall was packed with families, foundation staff and board members. The hum of conversation and the occasional laugh filled the air. But Peter stood backstage, his hands gripping the edges of the podium he was about to carry onto, the stage. Despite Sylvia's words of encouragement, the weight of what he was about to do pressed heavily on him. "You're going to do great," Sylvia whispered beside him, her hand resting briefly on his arm. "Just be yourself. That's all anyone wants to see." Peter nodded, swallowing hard. The quiet hum of the crowd turned into applause as Sylvia stepped onto the stage to introduce him. She spoke with her usual confidence, but there was a noticeable warmth in her tone. "Tonight we have someone very special to speak with us, someone whose journey embodies the mission of Bright Futures. Please welcome Peter." The applause that followed was thunderous, but Peter felt his legs turn to jelly as he stepped into the spotlight. Taking a deep breath, he began. "Hi, everyone," Peter said, his voice slightly shaky but growing steadier with each word. "My name is Peter, and I'm here because, like many of you, I've had my share of struggles." He paused, scanning the room. Max and Lily sat in the front row, Max giving him a thumbs up, while Lily clutched her stuffed bunny tightly. Their presence gave him the strength to continue. 2 years ago, my life turned upside down. My wife passed away suddenly, and I was left trying to figure out how to be a father, a provider, and everything else all at once. There were days when I didn't know if I'd make it. I felt like I was failing my kids, like no matter how hard I worked, it wasn't enough. The room fell silent, the weight of Peter's words settling over the audience. But then, he continued, his voice growing stronger, I met people who reminded me that I wasn't alone, people who believed in me when I couldn't believe, in myself. And through this foundation, I've had the chance to share my story, not because it's unique, but because it's not. So many of us are going through tough times, and what we need isn't judgment, it's connection, it's hope. Peter glanced towards Sylvia, who nodded encouragingly. I'm not perfect. I don't have all the answers, but if my story can help someone else feel less alone, then maybe I'm doing something right. As Peter stepped back from the microphone, the room erupted into applause. The standing ovation was overwhelming, but Peter's heart swelled with a sense of belonging he hadn't felt in years. He looked at his children, who were cheering the loudest, and felt a surge of pride. As the applause died down, a commotion broke out at the back of the hall. A young staff member, clearly nervous, approached the stage. Sylvia stepped forward to meet her. After a brief exchange, Sylvia's expression hardened and she turned to address the audience. Excuse me, everyone, Sylvia said, her voice calm but firm. It's come to my attention that some of the rumors circulating about Peter were deliberately fabricated. A murmur rippled through the crowd as Sylvia gestured for the staff member to speak. The young woman hesitated, but then said, We found discrepancies in the reports that were shared with the board. Brian was behind it. He exaggerated and twisted things to undermine Peter. All eyes turned to Brian, who was seated near the back of the hall. His face turned pale as whispers erupted around him. Sylvia's gaze was unrelenting. Brian, is this true? Brian stood, his posture defensive. I was just raising concerns. You were giving him so much attention. I thought you could discredit someone who's done nothing but work hard for this foundation. Sylvia interrupted, her tone icy. This foundation is built on integrity, and there's no place here for actions like yours. The board members exchanged glances, nodding in agreement. Brian's protest was cut short as one of the senior members leaned forward. Effective, Immediately, Brian, you're relieved of your responsibilities. We'll review your future with the foundation after this meeting. After the event, Peter found himself surrounded by families, thanking him for his honesty. One man, tears in his eyes, said, "Your story gave me the courage to ask for help. I've been trying to do everything on my own, and now I see I don't have to." Another woman added, "Thank you for being so real. It's easy to feel like you're the only one struggling, but you reminded us we're in this together." Peter's voice was hoarse from answering questions and offering words of encouragement, but he didn't mind. For the first time, he felt like he truly belonged, not just in the foundation, but in the lives of the people it served. Sylvia approached him as the crowd began to thin. "You were incredible tonight," she said, her smile full of pride. "Thank you," Peter said, his tone quiet but sincere. "I wasn't sure I could do it." "I never doubted you," Sylvia replied, "and neither did they." As the night wound down, one of the board members approached Peter and Sylvia. "Peter," she said, "we've been talking and we'd like to invite you to take on a more formal leadership role with the foundation. You've shown that you have what it takes to inspire and connect with people. We think you can help us take our mission even further." Peter blinked, stunned. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it," Sylvia said, her eyes sparkling with encouragement. Peter looked at Max and Lily, who were dozing off on a nearby bench, and then back at Sylvia. For the first time, he felt like his future was filled with possibilities. Not just for him, but for his family. "I'll think about it," he said, a small smile forming on his lips. The morning sun cast a warm glow over the newly renovated Family Resource Center as Peter stood outside, watching volunteers hang the final decorations. Bright banners fluttered in the breeze, reading, "Bright Futures Family Resource Center, building stronger communities together." Max and Lily ran back and forth across the lawn, their laughter mingling with the sounds of last-minute preparations. Peter adjusted his tie nervously. He had never been comfortable in formal attire, but Sylvia had insisted this was a moment to celebrate, and he needed to look the part. As he straightened his jacket, Sylvia approached, clipboard in hand, radiating her usual air of calm authority. "Everything's coming together beautifully," she said, her eyes scanning the bustling crowd of volunteers and staff. "You've done an incredible job, Peter." Peter chuckled nervously. "I think we is the right word here. I'd be lost without your guidance." Sylvia smiled, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Maybe at first, but look at you now. You've stepped into this role with such confidence. Today is proof of that." Peter nodded, his eyes drifting to Max and Lily, who were now helping set up the refreshments table. "It feels good. You know, seeing this come to life, knowing it's going to make a real difference." Sylvia followed his gaze, her expression softening. "That's what it's all about. Families like yours will have a place to turn when they need support, and that's because of you." As the event began, families started arriving, filling the space with a warm and welcoming energy. The resource center was a sight to behold. Its bright, cheerful interiors were equipped with classrooms for job training, play areas for children, and private spaces for counseling sessions. The community had rallied around the project, contributing donations, labor, and unwavering support. Sylvia stood at the podium on the outdoor stage, her voice amplified over the chatter of the crowd. "Welcome, everyone, to the grand opening of the Bright Futures Family Resource Center. This project is a testament to what we can achieve when we come together as a community." She paused, her eyes scanning the audience. "When I started this foundation, my dream was to create a space where families could find hope and support, no matter their circumstances. But dreams don't become reality without the people who bring them to life. One of those people is Peter." Sylvia turned toward Peter, motioning for him to join her on stage. The crowd erupted into applause as Peter stepped forward, his heart pounding. Taking a deep breath, he gripped the edges of the podium and began. "Thank you, Sylvia," Peter said, his voice steady despite the nerves. "2 years ago, I never could have imagined standing here today. Back then, my world felt like it was falling apart. I had just lost my wife, and I was trying to raise 2 kids on my own, barely scraping by. There were nights when I didn't know if I'd make it through the week." He paused, glancing at Max and Lily in the front row. They smiled back at him, their pride unmistakable. But then I met people who believed in me, people who reminded me that it's okay to ask for help, that it's okay to lean on others. When life feels impossible, this center is a reflection of that. It's a place where no one has to feel alone, where kindness and community come together to lift each other up. The crowd applauded, and Peter continued, his voice filled with conviction. "If there's one thing I've learned, it's that kindness has a ripple effect. A small act, a helping hand, a word of encouragement can change lives in ways we might never see. That's what this center is about, creating ripples of kindness that reach farther than we ever imagined." As Peter stepped back from the podium, the audience rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. Sylvia joined him, her smile radiant. "You were perfect," she whispered. After the speeches, the center opened its doors and families explored its many features. Peter found himself surrounded by parents and children eager to share their excitement and gratitude. One mother approached him with tears in her eyes. "This place means everything to us," she said. "Thank you for being brave enough to share your story." Max and Lily darted toward him, holding a large handmade card. "Daddy, we made this for you," Max said, beaming. The card was covered in crayon drawings and read, "Thank you for being our hero." Peter knelt, pulling them into a tight hug. "You too are the reason I do everything. I love you more than anything." Lily giggled, holding up her bunny. "Bunny, says you're the best daddy ever." As the event wound down, Sylvia found Peter standing near the edge of the lawn, watching the sunset. She approached quietly, holding 2 glasses of sparkling cider. "For a job well done," she said, handing him one. Peter accepted it with a grateful smile. "I couldn't have done it without you." Sylvia shook her head. "You had it in you all along. I just helped you see it." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Sylvia spoke again. "I've been thinking about the future of the foundation. This center is just the beginning. I want to focus more on creating spaces like this, places where families can thrive." Peter turned to her, sensing there was more. "And what about you?" Sylvia smiled, her gaze thoughtful. "I think it's time for me to step back a little, to make room for new leadership. People like you, Peter. You have the heart, the drive, and the connection to the community. You could take this even further." Peter stared at her, stunned. "Sylvia, I don't know if I'm ready for that." "You will be," she said confidently, "and I'll be here to guide you every step of the way." The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden hue over the quiet streets. Peter stood in front of the Bright Futures Family Resource Center, hands in his pockets, his breath forming small clouds in the crisp morning air. He often arrived, early now, before the bustle of the day began. This was his space, his purpose, a place that had grown into more than just a resource center. It was a beacon of hope, a testament to how far he had come. Peter's journey played in his mind like a film reel. He remembered the sleepless nights, worrying about Max and Lily, the humiliating moments of asking for help, and the nagging voice that had told him he wasn't good enough. Now, standing in the heart of a thriving community, surrounded by people who believed in him, Peter couldn't help but smile. He thought back to the chance encounter with Sylvia that had set everything in motion. Her belief in him, her relentless encouragement, had been the spark he needed. But this journey wasn't just about him. It was about everyone who had dared to trust that kindness and connection could change lives. Later that day, the Resource Center held a celebration. Families gathered in the brightly lit hall, sharing stories of their transformations. Peter listened as a mother recounted how the foundation had helped her find stable housing, her voice trembling with gratitude. A young man spoke of how training sessions at the center had led to his first full-time position. These stories, Peter realized, were the true legacy of the work they had all done together. Sylvia stood at the back of the room, watching Peter interact with the families. Her heart swelled with pride as she saw the once hesitant man now leading with confidence and compassion. As the event wound down, she stepped onto the stage, signaling for everyone's attention. "I want to thank you all for being here today," Sylvia began, her voice clear and steady. "This center is a dream come true, but more than that, it's a symbol of what we can achieve when we believe in each other." She paused, her gaze landing on Peter. "I've decided it's time for me to step back from my day-to-day role. In the foundation, I believe leadership is about knowing when to make space for others to rise, and Peter has risen in ways that have inspired us all." The room erupted in applause as Peter looked at Sylvia, stunned. She smiled at him, her eyes shining. "Peter, this is your moment. Your heart, your story, and your resilience are what this foundation needs to keep moving forward." That evening, Peter sat on the couch at home, Max and Lily snuggled up on either side of him. The handmade card they'd given him at the grand opening was framed on the wall, a constant reminder of their love and support. "Daddy," Lily said, resting her head on his shoulder, "are you going to help more people?" "Now?" Peter kissed the top of her head. "That's the plan, sweetheart. We're going to help as many people as we can." Max grinned. "Maybe I can work at the center when I'm older." Peter chuckled. "I'd like that, buddy." The next day, as Peter walked to his car, he noticed a man struggling to fix his flat tire on the side of the road. The scene was all too familiar. Peter pulled over, grabbed his tools, and approached with a smile. "Need a hand?" The man looked up, relief washing over his face. "I'd appreciate that." As Peter knelt to loosen the bolts, he thought of Sylvia's words about the ripple effect of kindness. This was where it had all started, and now it had come full circle. As Peter's story reminds us, even the smallest acts of kindness can have a profound impact. What ripple of kindness can you start today? Share your thoughts or a personal story in the comments below. We'd love to hear how kindness has touched your life. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to hear more inspiring tales of resilience and hope. Together, we can keep spreading positivity and building stronger communities. Let's create ripples of kindness that reach farther than we ever imagined.